Welcome to the Smooth Scaling podcast, where we talk with industry experts to uncover how to design, build, and run scalable and resilient systems with the ultimate goal of providing great user experience. I'm your host, José Quaresma, and today with us we have Karen Risvig. She is the head of product and UX here at Qt, and we talk about how to build features and products when it's so important to have the scalability and resilience and security in mind. So we talk about some of the trade-offs and considerations when building those and when deciding what to build. And one thing that I really enjoyed from her perspective was to think about kind of what are the problems that we are solving for our customers and kind of what are the solutions that we have for those. Hi, Karen. Welcome to the Smooth Scaling podcast. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get here?
That's such a big question. How does anyone get anywhere? So way back when, I come from a background in political science. I studied that at university and went into management consulting and did that for a few years. And via that, I got into some of the IT projects that we were doing. So started working more on these smaller iteration and improvements that the customers had to these specific platforms that we built out for them. And so over time, I got more and more familiar with that. Started to see, can we use this platform for more than just one customer so we could benefit of the work that we'd already done. And so in the back of that, where I was at that time, we decided to start building a self-service tool for doing surveys. Mm-hmm. Not just like a survey platform, but specifically towards HR surveys and engagement surveys, like you would know it from so many different tools out there. And I was asked to head that up with my experience from the HR survey world. I had been a team leader for the HR project managers and with the IT projects. So kind of just delved into that as my first, that was PO, product owner, Scrum terminology. And just really dived in, so many new things to learn. How do you approach a product versus a project? What are the differences? What can we utilize from these different toolboxes? What's the newest research? What's shaken in that world? Everyone was reading Inspired and all about the customer. And it is all about the customer. And found real joy in this. I think, when you come from a project world where you focus on the deliveries, diving more into the problem-solving mode and saying, I don't know exactly what I'm going to deliver, but I know what problem it is I'm going to fix. Yeah. That really lit a fire under me. And so having done that a few years in that company, I wanted to try it in a different world, in a smaller setting. It's not that Qt is a small company, but it is the size of my previous department. So there's 17,000 people around, are not here. We're just the 200 that we are. And what I really love is that we are all focused around the same product. We're not doing a whole bunch of other stuff, no matter which department we're in, whether we're supporting the customers or helping them with the setup, selling to them, we're all working for the same thing. So that's kind of my journey to getting here. Then I was a product manager for a few years at Qt, and then I transitioned into the role as head of late last year.
And you mentioned this project versus product kind of differences. When you did that transition, was there anything that surprised you or was unexpected in kind of between the two, kind of going from focusing on a project to more the product part?
I don't think there was anything that surprised me as such. I think one of the things that you often, or I at least often would feel as a project manager, is that you're hired to deliver on something very specific. And if halfway through the project you figure out this is actually not what the client or customer needs, then you can't really change scope because there's a legal agreement and there might have been a tender process, all of these different things. And so you kind of have to deliver on what you were hired for, not necessarily what the customer needs. And you always leave the project with the delivery, not the actual change that should come after. Yeah. And so you don't get to follow up on the problem solving part. And that was kind of always the unsatisfying part. So I think I kind of, found the missing piece, so to speak, when going into the product. It's not that it's easy or that we always get it right. Not at all. I'm also a very big believer in failing, because that's where we learn. But there's a satisfaction and then keep hammering at that problem until you find out what is the right solution, actually.
Any specific features that you would highlight that you've kind of have been part of developing in Qt that kind of come to mind as kind of, oh, this one was?
Well, I think the obvious answer is invite only. Our invite only waiting rooms, that was kind of my first thing. It was more or less developed in a very early stage when I onboarded. And then it just became my question of, let's get it out in the state it's in. Let's see how the customers interact with this product, how they want to use it, and then figure out where we go from there. The specific problem, we talk a lot about bots and bad actors and how do we fight them and how do we keep them out of our sales so that we make room for the real and valuable customers that we want to let in. And the invite-only waiting room was kind of like an easy one to work with in that sense, because that's the specific problems it solves.
Yeah.
We just ignore the bots and then we just invite the people we want, and then we don't let anyone else in. But from having a product that does that, and we actually even had it before we put the invite-only waiting room out there, you could build it kind of with the different building blocks that we have here in Qt. But we also needed to make it easier for customers to make that choice. And so we started and we still have that for a few customers. They still have this option, just like a list of links, long links that you then distribute out. It's not super elegant for the end user. And we also figured out it's kind of difficult to work with because you can't merge these long links into emails. But it solves that problem in a very out-of-the-box solution. You don't need development capabilities. You just need to download a list and send them out. And then you're protected at a very, very high level. And so continuing to work with that and say, okay, how can we make it easier to work with? How can we enable customers to verify their visitors in an easier way? And then with that comes, all these different things. How does it look in the UI? Where do you do this? And how do you do this? And what is it that you want to verify? And how do we want to verify? And is it a simple one-step verification? Do we need 2 steps? All of these different questions that arise along the way. So it's a product we've been working on continuously for the past 3 years. Also seeing more and more usage year over year. And I think that's been kind of, the exciting journey. And then, of course, when you start interacting with customers around these things, you start to learn more about how do they work with valuable visitors? Do they know who their valuable visitors are? Do they have anyone to invite? Do they have enough information to not just say, I'm going to invite everyone I have in my email database? Can they focus in on where you believe there's the highest rate of conversion? So a lot of other projects has kind of spun from this and from the research that we did. And I think that's also, that's one of the interesting things. When you start lifting stones, you never know what you're going to find.
So talk about one that you've been kind of involved, and I guess it's ever evolving, but it was kind of a big one. And I'm also a big fan of invite only. Is there any kind of that you kind of look at it from being in kind of the early stages, or is there something if you can share, what are the things that are kind of that you're starting to look at that are exciting you, maybe scaring you a little bit, but more in that phase of analyzing things and start thinking about taking them through? Is there anything that you can share?
So we at any given day we will have a lot of things in a lot of different stages. But if we continue on this and the discussions of we started with the invite only waiting. I think one of the things that we started to learn in those discussions is that, and over the past many years, everyone has been really good at collecting behavioral data. So we know, how many people are clicking on something, how many people are visiting something, and we try to use that to deduce what will your next steps be. But what we don't know anything about are people's preferences. I only know what you show me. I don't know what you don't show me. So if you are buying shoes for your daughter, then, I think all you want is girl shoes.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have a potential to also sell you, spearfishing gear, something. You might have a hidden interest, right? That I don't know anything about. So I only know what you show me. I don't know anything else. And that was really one of the places where when we talk to our customers, there is like a a hole in their knowledge. They know that they don't know it, but they also don't know how to get that information. Yeah. Because getting people to interact with something on a web page that is filled with so many different options is super difficult. And we also know that when we get them into our ticket shop or online retail, we want them to convert. We want to put in front of them what they're most likely to buy, and we want them out as fast as possible. Because the more time you have to think about it, the less chance that there is that you convert. And the waiting room is a bit of a funny thing in this whole world of, some people refer to it as the attention economy. We're getting slammed with everything left, right, and center, but the waiting room is this moment in time when nothing else happens. We're just watching that little man walk. And we know that people have a tendency to stay on the page because they don't want to miss their turn. So we actually have a product that is intended for, infrastructure protection and all these things, which it does amazingly, but it also creates a moment in time where you have people's attention. And so one of the things that we're working on is to say, can we use this moment for something that is valuable, that is engaging for the visitor, that they want to interact with, and that is valuable to the customer, and that they can get more knowledge, or they can show the visitor that there are more options than what you're just waiting for right now. Yeah. It's not just about the ticket you're about to pay to buy. Maybe there's also an option of buying a t-shirt, and maybe you can pre-order your dinner, these different things. Can we use this moment in time where people actually are relaxed to educate them on the other options, so that when they get to the page, they've already made the decision that, I want the t-shirt, and I'm going to, pre-book my dinner because I had that knowledge up front.
I guess they wouldn't be overwhelmed also when they get to the page because they thought about it before.
Exactly. And I remember, because I was buying tickets for a festival in fall, and there wasn't a queue on, but you still have that 10-minute window to buy your ticket. Yeah. And I really want to go. So even if there's a queue on, I'm a little bit, I need my ticket. And you have this time ticket going down. And now all of a sudden I get a question if I want a t-shirt. And I'm like, I don't know. What are the sizes? What does it look like? And all of a sudden I have to think about this, and the clock is going down. And again, I could just let it run out and go back and do it over. But that's just not the mentality, the mental space you're in. Yeah. And so if there had been if I'd been prepared up front, when you come in here to buy your ticket, you will have these options. This is the t-shirt. Would you be interested in a t-shirt? Yes or no? Yeah. Which size would you? But that you have this up front, because then I would just make the choice. Yeah. And I think that can transfer into, the dinner that goes with, or the hotel booking that you might want to do together with your concert if you're traveling, or the bag that goes with the shoes, basically anything, right? So it becomes an upsell opportunity if we can help people make that decision up front.
Exciting.
So that's something that is in its very early stage right now that we're working on, which I think is it was really born out of the conversations that we had way early on in Invite Only.
Super interesting couple of examples that I think make it very, very concrete. If we try to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at kind of the whole process, are there any kind of very interested, because I'm usually more involved in the later stages of the process, right? And the feature is either kind of being developed and you're getting some feedback, or kind of being released. The very early stages, I mean, how is it that you look at the signals? How I think you mentioned hearing the customers, talking with the customers, and that's some of the things with Invite Only and the other example you shared. But do you have any rule of thumb, kind of any usual guidelines for how do you think about those ideas, how to analyze those ideas before you then kind of move them further?
I think it depends very much on the problem that you have found, and where you have found it, and how you have found it. Sometimes, a problem arises because we have put out one feature, and then we find that the customer interacts with it differently than we thought. And that then opens up a new avenue. And then you can say that the timeline from seeing the problem to validating that it is a thing is very, very short, because the customer or user has already expressed it, that this is something they want to do simply by the way they interact. Yeah. And then it becomes, of course, there's always a cost-benefit analysis. How difficult this is to build, what's it going to cost us, what are the risks involved, how many customers can we help, by doing this. And we always, of course, need to weigh those things against each other. If we had unlimited resources, we would always have to make that choice. Right? You can never do everything that you want to do. So sometimes it is something where we see, oh, I thought you were going to do something different with my product. Oh, you started to use this in a weird way. What is it that you're trying to achieve? And then, the product kind of validates its own problem, and it becomes an easier decision to say, well, this is actually something we want to help people with. Let's just build something that is fit for purpose. Or maybe we say, this is not a good way of interacting with the product. We take this as feedback instead, and we do adjustments in the way that the product works. And then there are the things that, are more like out there. That isn't something we do today already. And then, of course, the process becomes a little longer. Yeah. One thing is, of course, that a customer expresses this is something we would like to do. But I think I usually equate it with the pony. If you ask,
I know what a pony is, but
if you ask
you need more context.
What do you want for your birthday? And just a pony.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone wants a pony. Yeah. But it's not the same thing as you're willing to, feed the pony and ride the pony and do you have a stable for the pony. And is it actually what, at the end of the day, do you really want it? It's a nice picture to paint.
You want the idea of the pony.
The idea of the pony. And so, of course, there's always this, is it a need to or a nice to? And if it's a nice to, is it such a delighter that you would still be willing to pay for it? Because let's not kid ourselves, we're also running a business. And so there are some steps that we need to go through. And usually what we do is that we work with POCs to see if we can actually get a customer to use something, use new functionality before we commit fully and build it out. That's also what would allow us to provide, valuable metrics and see, did this actually do what the customer wanted it to do? The other way is also just reverting back to good old desk research. I have read so many reports on, what's trending in e-com, what are the biggest problems that people are trying to solve, all of these different things, because that just provides a different view on it, that it's not just my customers saying that they would like something, but that I also see that it's a discussion happening in the industry, whether that is e-com or ticketing or something else, that we always keep a broader view. Because we know that our customers also read these reports. Yeah. They go to the conferences when these things are discussed. Yeah. And so we need to stay on top of that as well. So there's industry movements is a definite good place to look at different opportunities together with customer pains. And where these two things match, we usually have a good case for doing something and doing something different, doing something new.
And you mentioned finding the problem or problems. Is it always a problem, or can it start with an opportunity? Does it always have to be a problem that you're solving, or could it be an opportunity that you're exploring, or am I splitting hairs?
No, I don't think we're necessarily splitting hairs, but I think so. There can definitely be an opportunity that we're looking for. But the reason that is an opportunity is because there is a void, and then the void is a problem. Okay. But then and I think sometimes we spot the opportunity, and then we need to kind of dial back and figure out what was the void. Why did this even become an opportunity? Because when we go out and position it, and then I think, that's as with anything you're selling, it's easy. If you sell the promise of a better life, I also kind of have to establish what the worst life looked like.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
Even though it's not always fair.
No.
But it's
maybe a bit two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and sometimes you see them as opportunities before you find the problem, and sometimes you see the problem and then you have to find out what the opportunity is. So it's two sides of the same thing, and you can spot both, and you need both. So if we see a problem, we need to figure out what the opportunity is. If we see an opportunity, then we need to understand what is the problem that led to this opportunity, because that's also what's going to guide us in terms of scoping out the right solution for where we want to go, because that is the underlying problem that needs to be fixed.
I guess circle back to the beginning where we talked about that we would also try to talk a little bit about product development from a perspective of scalability and resilience and security. And I don't know if you want to pick one of those, scalability, resilience, security specifically, or if you want to, we could also take them as kind of three kind of requirements together as a one side of the scale, right? But how do you see the balance? Kind of how do you see them when you're thinking about problems and solutions, and how do you think about the scalability side and resilience, especially here at Qt, where that's such an important part of what we do, of what we promise our customers?
So I think everything I have said up until now is more or less generic, right? Whatever company you were working in doing software, this could apply.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when we go into the finer details, the nature of the company becomes important, the nature of the product. And I think when we say to our customers that we're here to protect you on your busiest days, then we have to make damn sure that we can manage not just one customer's busiest day, but 100 customers' busiest day all at once. And so this becomes a definite concern.
Yeah.
So it also depends on the type of feature and what it's supposed to do. So some things we develop for our admin tool.
Yeah.
Where we have an average of, I think, 3,000 users per month, never that many users at one time. And then it becomes more about accuracy, right? You have to make sure that what we show the customer is the right numbers, that they know how to interact with the product and that they can't make mistakes, or if they can, that it's not mistakes that, that hurts them, that we guide them to make good decisions. And that's really important, because at the end of the day, if you make a mistake in your setup, or if we give you the wrong numbers, you might make decisions that hamper your business. So hugely important. We know that, if you put on full protection of your website using Qt and you get your actions and triggers wrong, you might, be out of business for 5 minutes, which can mean an immense amount of money. So it is really important that we get those things right and that we help customers make good decisions. And I think we're very aware of that we might be a product that more or less everyone in the world has been in contact with, but not everyone has seen, because we're in that layer between. So that is really important. And then the next thing is, so if it's something that passes through the waiting room and passes through the connector, scalability is key. It has to scale. Yeah. Because if it doesn't, then we're back to the other problem. And how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of different considerations that go into that, because obviously we need to validate, as we talked about before, that this is even the right thing to build. And so maybe in the very, very early stages, we take more control. We look at, the customer that we're testing with. We find an event where we don't have the highest amount of traffic, or where the risks are slightly lower, and we watch it very closely, and we're ready to pull everything out if something starts to happen. And then we risk mitigate with that. But obviously, as we get closer and closer to a finished product that we need to be able to put out there for the customers to work with, then we need to be sure that it can handle the loads. And so, of course, we look at the technology that we use, and that we have auto scaling and all of these different things, and we load test to our heart content until we feel secure that this can handle whatever we throw at it. We also look at how do we design the technical implementation. For example, with the feature I was talking about before, where we can ask questions and collect preferences from the waiting room. Well, one thing is the actual visitor on the waiting room, that we are sure that we can actually collect those answers in a timely manner and give the real visitor a good experience. But if the world was just real good visitors and good people, then we probably wouldn't have the jobs we have. There's a lot of bad actors out there, and they don't even see the UI. But what will they do? How will they act? Will they try to take down a waiting room by hammering on an API? And how do we then protect that? And one thing is, of course, we can look at stampede protection and other things, but we can also look at how do we design the data points that we accept to listen to. So having validations and different checks and balances in that flow. Having everything into a message queue instead of trying to write everything directly. Like these places where we can build in some latency that also buys us time to do things. So there's a lot of different considerations that goes into it. And I think that's one of the things that also attracted me to Qt as a place to work. It is such a it is such a delicate user experience, right? It's like nothing. It's so simple. But when you lift the hood of the car and you have a look underneath, making such a simple user experience is extremely complex. And throws so many different questions at you that really also makes you think about what is important and when is it important, which is, I think, one of the super interesting things.
And with the scalability part, I was out when you were talking about. I was also thinking about the feature that you talked about that we're working on now with the getting some answers from the visitors and getting some data there. We were discussing this before, that I think it's very easy to make a survey to get users to answer, right? But it's not as easy to make it in a way that can handle millions of visitors kind of answering that survey at the same time, right? So that always that scalability perspective and together with resilience as well, I think it's super interesting.
And I have been in the survey business. I know that, we had maybe, I'm not going to mention names, but like 50,000 people come to our platform at once, and that would be an issue. And here at Qt, 50,000 is nothing. We have to handle so much more. And then it also becomes a question, right? So how do you balance that, the scalability with, does everything have to happen at once? What is it actually important that scales? It's important that every single visitor can see those questions and interact with it, and that the data isn't lost. But it is not necessarily important that all of those answers are written instantly into the database. Because it's not urgent. So, for example, if we look at our traffic insights product, it is really important that you instantly can see if an IP address is aggressive, because you need the opportunity to block. So that's important. And that at that point, data instance is important. But it's not on the other side, because if that takes 2 minutes to update, you're still fine. The data is still there. It's more important that the data is there and it's kept and it's written than it is written instantly. So it's always these different balances and trying to figure out what is actually most important. What is it actually that needs to scale? And balancing these things out, because scaling, like it all comes down to some software costs money to run. It doesn't just run on thin air. And so how do we balance these things out? So we ensure that we have a scalable and reliable product that also runs cost efficiently.
Can you think of any, we talked a little about you mentioned the trade-offs, right? Are there any specific examples that come to mind that where you were part of having to make a trade-off, maybe a trade-off that you weren't happy with, but that you had to take? Is there anything that comes to mind from that perspective, of maybe some that, I don't know, a feature that sounded awesome in theory, but then when you look at it, then there's no way that you can make it in a scalable way?
There probably is. I don't know. I think, we tend to remember our successes and forget our failures.
That's good.
I have definitely had weird ideas along the way when the team has pushed back and said, this is over engineering and this doesn't make sense. And I think it's nothing I can remember, so it can't be that important. But I think oftentimes, it's important that we have different roles in our teams, and that you have a product manager that maybe, dreams big or, wants to get to some, amazing future in a few steps. And then that's where we put in the engineers to push back and to check with reality. And at the end of the day, that's where the magic happens as well. That's where we find the good solutions. I'm a firm believer that 3 brains think better than 1. And the more diversity we put into these discussions, the better products we build. And so, I might have a weird idea that I get UX on, and we do like amazing drawings, and we take them to developers, and they'd be like, this is, 10 months of development work to do this little bit thing over here. Is that really important? And then, no, that of course checks things, right? But I still might keep it and have it as a dream out there. But that really goes into like the team dynamics and how we work around things.
Thank you. That was you did get some in the end some nice examples, so I appreciate that. So how long have you been in Kuwait now?
3 years and 2-3 months. 3 months.
Would it if thinking about kind of the top 3, maybe that's, I don't know, you could top 1 to top 3 kind of lessons that you've learned from working in Qt, but maybe also even with our customers?
I think, and you know, this, when you start in a new company, and even though I firmly believe that product management is a general toolbox that can be applied in a lot of different industries, I came from a hosted setup and into a cloud-based setup, and there's a difference. I'm having like a better understanding of the cloud technology would probably have helped me earlier on, but you know, that's a learning curve, right? I would also, so I think I only got to appreciate the complexity of the product once I was actually in here. And again, I couldn't have known that beforehand. I think that's just part of it. But we would probably all want to, you know, understand all of that better. I think the whole bots world was completely new to me. I knew about bots, like, because they're in the news, they talk about the ticket scalpers and all of these things. But seeing it in effect, what it actually looks like on the network, I had no idea. So I think, and that's like a constant learning thing, right? I think you would agree with me. Like every time we feel like we have them, then
it's a constant fight.
They slip us again, right? So I think, you know, like that's probably the 3 things. But I don't think I could have known more before. I think it would always be nicer if we could get knowledge faster. If I could just, you know, put a book under my pillow, but that's just not what the world is. And I think part of what I enjoy and that, you know, I still do that even today. If we want to start something new, there's new knowledge to be had, there's new learnings to be had, and that's also part of what drives me.
Thank you. And maybe we could wrap up with a few rapid fire questions. Are you ready for that? So I think we have maybe four questions. Then you can just answer, ideally short, but just answer what comes to mind. So let's try it. For you, scalability is important. Is there a resource, could be a book, a blog, a person that you would recommend to listeners?
That's difficult because my favorite podcast on product is Danish, unfortunately.
Okay.
And it doesn't run anymore, but there's like 60 episodes to listen to. But it's called From Agility to Beyond, which has been it has been a slightly guiding light for me. They take in different subjects, talk to different like Danish startups, different products. So it's a mixture of use cases. When the whole Bandcamp thing happened, they did like a whole episode of that. So not a specific framework, but more of a what is agile and what does it look like in the real world. And I think for me, that kind of took it from the theoretical and into the practical, and was a place where I've gotten a lot of inspiration from.
Very cool. So at least our Danish listeners will be able to really take advantage of that, or anyone that might want to learn Danish.
That is the usual suspect, right? I think Lean Product Playbook, Measure What Matters, Build Trap, but everyone knows them.
Well, maybe not. Thank you for sharing. What advice would you give to yourself early in your career?
Don't be afraid to change course.
Nice.
I think it's the best thing I've done.
That's a good advice. I think we should wrap it up there. I think that was a nice way to wrap it up.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this episode of the Smooth Scaling Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing and perhaps share it with a friend or colleague. If you want to share any thoughts or comments with us, send them to smoothscaling@qit.com. This podcast is researched by Joseph Thwaites, produced by Perseo Mandilo, and brought to you by Qit, your virtual waiting room partner. I'm your host, Jose Quaresma. Until next time, keep it smooth, keep it scalable.